Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey here with Anthony Broom, my good friend, trusted agent, on a Wednesday afternoon, recording a little bit early here. We got Anthony's got some things going on end of the week here. Our Chris Ballas, who was not able to make it at the last minute, is traveling to Tampa tomorrow for the Frozen Four. So we'll have you covered with all of your Michigan hockey needs over at the Wolverine.com. But things moving fast with the transfer portal, Michigan basketball, and their roster. We're also going to do a little bit of cleanup from spring football, talk about some position battles. We will rifle through those, give our take on where things stand on some of those at the beginning. We'll get out of here with some hockey talk and basketball. We are brought to you by My Perfect Franchise, Andy Luedecke. Are you ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream? Looking for a side hustle while working your current job? Are you wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy? Well, Andy can help. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help you if you have any questions about business ownership. You can contact Andy Luedecke. Go to www.myperfectfranchise.net. Hit him up on the phone, 404-973-9901. Email him, andy@myperfectfranchise.net. And like we said, go to his website, book a time with him on his calendar. Again, 100% free to get that conversation, to get that consultation, and then you can kind of go from there. But Andy's a great guy. I've said it every week, but we met with him about a month ago now, and his vision and what he's been able to do helping people out has been fantastic. So we're very happy to be aligned with him. So check out myperfectfranchise.net. Andy Luedecke, a great guy there. Before we get into it as well, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel here if you're watching there. Also, hit the thumbs up button, the like button on this video. That really helps us out, helps other people see our work. And the Wolverine.com premium access over there to all of our articles, to our message board where you can interact with thousands of Michigan fans. $29.99 all the way through August 31st. So it takes you right into that football season. So it should be a lot of fun with a lot of news coming and a lot of analysis, a lot of insider scoop on Michigan football, basketball, and recruiting. Anthony, bring you in here. First of all, it's April 5th. We are recording a day early, which means that we're recording on 4/5/23, which was Scott Bell. Of course, he probably had this ready since the minute that game went, the clock hit zero. But 45-23, Michigan beats Ohio State last year. So happy 4/5/23. It's also my mom's birthday, so happy birthday to her. But AP, how you feeling on this 4/5/23?
Well, enriched now that I know that the Safeys have a birthday to celebrate. So right. Happy birthday to Mama Safey. Scott Bell is like he's like a Michigan fan AI in terms of trolling content and reminders of awesome moments. So we love Scott. Happy 4/5/23. It's a happy day. Although as we record this, there are severe storms and tornadoes ripping through Southeast Michigan. So hopefully everyone stays safe out there. But a lot to get to, a lot to discuss. As we know, spring football done for the Wolverines. Basketball, there's transfer portal stuff that is fluid every single day. There are things we'll probably say in this show that date themselves before it even comes out. But here we are. I mean, it's the off season now for both teams, both sports. Full steam ahead, full speed or nothing. So let's do it.
No doubt. So let's get into it. Let's talk some Michigan football and go through some position battles. Not all of them as high profile. They have a settled starting quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. So we will start with the backup quarterback job. And we got a glimpse of both guys in the spring game. I thought Jack Tuttle had his moments. I thought he also had some really poor moments as well. I thought Davis Warren started slow. I thought Davis Warren had some really nice moments at the end and led his team down on a drive to win the spring game. But from everything we've heard, from everything that people have said, and from our view of the team during the spring game, where do you feel like this one stands? Because I think this is going into fall camp. I'm sure you probably agree. But, I mean, what did you see from those guys, and where do you think this thing stands?
Yeah, I think that both guys, you're right, it will go into fall camp the way I see it. And honestly, it will probably go well into the regular season. I mean, knowing that you have, assuming, again, knock on the closest, piece of wood next to you, knowing that you have your starting quarterback set, there really shouldn't be any reason for either of those guys play in anything other than mop-up duty or to take, a victory formation at the end of a game. So for me, I think you just kind of ride the hot hand, so to speak, whoever that winds up being in practice on a given week, or just who stacks the most good days together. I think that Jack Tuttle was brought here similar to in a similar vein to Alan Bowman, where it's just kind of more insurance for the ceiling or the floor of your quarterback room. Though I do think that Bowman was better. He had starting experience in the Big 12 in a pass happy offense. So I think you can give him the edge over that there. But, Davis Warren did some good. I mean, they both did good things over the weekend. I think I liked how decisive Jack Tuttle was when he decided to pull the ball and start running. Davis Warren obviously had the better statistical day through the air, but a lot of that was due to just chucking the ball up to Peyton O'Leary and hoping he made a play. Those two are roommates. And
Peyton O'Leary down there somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like one of those 500 dead or alive type deals. So backup quarterback, yeah. I mean, something that Michigan's had going for it with that in recent years, not as much last year, but maybe in the years before that, is that typically at least one of your guys battling for that job is someone that has a chance to start for this team down the road. And if you want to argue that maybe those two guys don't have the best chance of that, maybe it's actually Alex Orji, who his development, we'll see what he keeps doing. I think if he's a guy that can develop more as a passer, maybe he puts himself into that conversation. But I think we're probably at least a year away from that, and he might not even play quarterback. So the guys you have are what they are. I think that you have the benefit of having one of the best offensive lines in college football, a strong running game. I think some good safety valve type guys at the skill positions, maybe not a playmaker, but a lot of guys that you have confidence can, haul in passes and get open down the field. So, you don't want to see any of those guys really. It's weird to say you don't want to see either of them really play this year, but in terms of being comfortable with if they have to come in the game in a strong situation if they have to come into a game in a competitive situation, I still have questions about that.
For sure. So do I, but I agree with you. I think it's going to go into the season and we'll kind of see how it plays out. Alex Orji to me is kind of that guy that I think I have seen, and I was rewatching the spring game, and I think I have seen enough out of him to keep him at quarterback and just kind of see what they have. It's kind of an experiment that you just continue. I mean, he made some nice throws. Definitely looked better throwing than he did last year at this time when we saw him. And then the running ability and just how big and physical he is just so interesting. And, you're right. A year down the line, Jack Tuttle's not going to be here. Davis Warren probably will be unless he wants to transfer somewhere and, start in the MAC or something like that. And not ruling out him even starting here. But, if that's a possibility where somebody else is going to give him a starting job. Alex Orji's a guy that I wouldn't necessarily think is going to be your starter, but you could build an offense around that. I mean, I know Matt Weiss isn't there anymore, but the parallels between Michigan and the Ravens, it's you could do something now. The Lamar Jackson situation is not going great right now in Baltimore, but just a thought out there. Let's move the running back where you have Blake Corum, you have Donovan Edwards. It's another backup job, so let's not spend too much time on it, but there are some options for this third running back, position. And again, you probably don't want to see much of these guys if, because you want Blake and Donovan to stay healthy. Even in, Kalel Mullings coming into last season, when he was repping at running back for a while, it was can he be the short yardage guy? Turned out they didn't need an extra guy for that. It was Blake Corum, but they did need it later on in the year when he came in. So I don't even know how much of a role this guy's going to have. But it's still something to watch, given that both guys in at the running back spot, you need depth. Both guys have gone through injuries over the last two seasons. Kalel Mullings, I think I would handicap him as the guy with the best chance of maybe being number 3 on the depth chart. I think he's full on a running back at this point with the amount of depth they have at linebacker. CJ Stokes, who did not play in the spring game with apparently an injury, a little bit banged up. Then you have Ben Hall, who we were all talking about, and we broke him down on Monday. Cole Cabana is another kid who's banged up, but could factor in, maybe not to that straight up third role, but a guy who you maybe sprinkle in and have different packages for him. So for me, it's Kalel Mullings right now. Where do you kind of see this? But again, I think this competition is going to continue, and all these guys showed some promise.
Yeah, to me, it might just be another hot hand situation. Some weeks it could be Stokes. Some weeks it could be Mullings. I think that's probably your 3 and 4. We'll see about Benjamin Hall. I mean, it was great to see what he did in the spring game, but we've seen guys sort of come out of nowhere and be spring game stars before. Let's see what he does in fall camp. I'll agree. He looks the part. I think that if they can get him to run as physically as he looks like he can be on the field, or that he looks like he is in shoulder pads, that's a guy to look at, a year or two down the road. Cole Cabana, we'll see with the injuries. Pretty telling, not, in your initial, summation of the situation, Tavier Dunlap, I mean, this is probably a year where, if he doesn't see the field now, it's probably never going to happen at Michigan. So
here's the thing about Tavi. Like, Leon Franklin was getting carries in the spring game ahead of him. I mean,
yeah.
Were they on this? They might not have been on the same team, but he was down that depth chart. And then we haven't even mentioned Isaiah Gash, who actually did a couple nice things, had a huge 4th down pickup against Illinois last year. There's depth here. Mike Hart said it. They're way deeper than he thought they were last year at this time. And I mean, I don't think anybody would disagree with him there.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like they found a way to piece it together. I think with less depth last year. Maybe the offensive line. I still think last year's Michigan offensive line is the gold standard. I do think there's probably going to be just a little bit of a drop off there. But when you have guys up front that are that talented, I'm not stupid enough to say you could put you or I back there. But like I said, we've seen them pick up first downs and move piles and put drives together with third stringer, fourth stringer, walk-ons, you name it. So pretty confident about that.
For sure. Slot receiver was one that I would have touched on if we got to see either of those guys. I feel like it's currently like a Tyler Morris, AJ Henning type of battle, but I think we're going to see both. And I think AJ Henning and Tyler Morris's skill sets are so different that that's just kind of the way it goes. Skill sets being different is also the case at the tight end spot. I think we're going to see both. Looking at the numbers, I think it's 53% of snaps last year. Michigan had multiple tight ends on the field, according to Sports Info Solutions. We're going to see Colston Loveland and A.J. Barner together quite a bit. I think A.J. Barner is a little bit more of your guy that's going to line up on the line in a three-point stance. Colston Loveland, we saw him split out a lot in the spring game and at times last season. He's more of your Y tight end that's going to catch passes down the field. He can run vertically, that sort of thing. And he looks bigger, by the way. And he said this spring that he's looking to improve his blocking as well. But I think we're going to see both. I had him as an or on the offensive depth chart just because, one, we could have split that into two different tight end positions because I think they're different tight ends. And two, because I think depending on situation, depending on opponent, we could see one guy start one game, the next guy start the other game, one guy be in for an entire series, the next guy be in for the next series, that sort of thing, where they're going to be potentially interchangeable depending on a bunch of different factors. Matt Hibner was kind of the guy that would surprise me a little bit in the spring game, showed that they have some more depth there. But where do you see this thing? I mean, it's just good that they got A.J. Barner in and that now, tight end again looks like a potential strength.
It is a strength. And Colston Loveland, I think, is we've been racking our brains all offseason about, gosh, who's going to emerge at wide receiver? Who's going to be the number one guy? Who's going to be the number one target in this passing offense? I don't think you have to think too hard about it. I think there's a shot that it is Colston Loveland because of that versatility. We saw him play in line. We saw him play, out wide. They're going to move him around, and he's one of their best 11 on offense. So they're going to find ways to get him out there and keep him out there. And he's a guy that, some of these some of these tight ends come into college, and you need time to put the weight on and figure it out. And he certainly has done that. He looks like more physically developed than he was at this time last year, which you would expect. He was a true freshman going through his first spring football, but he, former high school wide receiver. He's got the ball skills. I think of the touchdown he had in the Big Ten championship game. That could be a guy that you throw the ball to down the field or chuck the ball up to him in the end zone and have him come down and get it. I think he can be the solution to a lot of the questions we have about this Michigan passing game. And we know the way that Harbaugh offenses have traditionally used the tight end, that's something that is going to be, he's going to have a lot of opportunities to be productive. So, yeah, I was impressed with Barner too. I think he's as good of a tight end 2 as you could ask for, maybe a fringe tight end 1, like you said, given what his role will be. Matt Hibner, we've been waiting on him, but they've just been so deep there. Max Bredesen, I think, is a blocking tight end, will pick up the role. I mean, he already had the role last year, but with Joe Honigford gone, Carter Seltzer gone, he's going to play a ton. So, Marlon Klein got a decent amount of run too. So all of a sudden, you look at this group, and I like the depth there. But Colston Loveland to me is number 1 with a bullet.
Yeah, and guys like Zach Marshall, an early enrollee. I think he has a bright future, probably a year or 2 away. And Deacon Tonielli coming in the summer. There are all sorts of names that you could envision any number of these guys being kind of the next guy. But they got a good top 2 right now, and Hibner makes me feel a little bit better about the depth of the room. Offensive line, I got one down, something that, I think coming into spring and before spring, before they released the roster, we thought Ladarius Henderson was going to be here as part of spring practices. Turns out has to finish up his degree. He'll be here with the team officially in the summer. He had told us initially that he was enrolling early, but obviously some plans changed. So left tackle to me is now kind of a position battle, and I'll tell you why. The right tackle job, there's just so many guys there, and that includes Carson Barnhart. They move him over to left for the spring, and obviously he repped at both, but we saw him in the spring game there. You saw him in just about every picture of him throughout the spring. He was at left tackle. He's so solid that he's not going to be a cakewalk to beat out. And when you're Sharon Moore and company and you're trying to figure out the best 5 on this offensive line, it may include Trente Jones at right tackle, who once again looks very good, and Carson Barnhart at left tackle. So Henderson's got to beat him out. Right now we have Carson Barnhart listed as a starter at left tackle as a snapshot of where things stand now, not necessarily a prediction, but he's got to come in and win that job. For now, I think it's Carson Barnhart, and I think we'll see that competition be ongoing throughout fall camp. Then you start shuffling the pieces around as you get closer to game day on September 2nd, where it's like, okay, now he's on the right side. This guy maybe moves the guard, that sort of thing, where you have all sorts of different mixing and matching. But for now, I think this is going to be a true battle coming in.
And it's something, too, where I could see it being another one of those position battles that go into the regular season. I'll say this. I thought that both Trente Jones and Carson Barnhart played well last season. Trente got off to a little bit of a rough start. But I'll tell you what, if you're going to come in and compete with Carson Barnhart for a job, you better bring your A game every single day, because he is just so steady there. And he's seen everything. He's played guard for this program. He's played both tackle spots. Trente Jones, like I said, I think that he has really played some good football, more towards the tail end or about the middle of last season before he got injured. That's a battle there too. And Miles Hinton is a guy who has some starting experience that will slide in there and be a part of that competition as well. So yeah, Ladarius Henderson, I mean, everything we've been told is that they expect him to be their left tackle, but the fact that he just missed out on 6 weeks of some quality competition that's already on the roster, he's going to be behind the 8 ball a little bit. But as we've seen, if you have the talent, think of a guy like JJ McCarthy last year, didn't have spring ball, comes back, and by the end of fall camp, you're looking at a guy where you're thinking about putting him in your starting lineup. So I love the competition on this offensive line. I mean, they are as deep there. They're deep enough to where if there were a couple guys that hit the transfer portal, in this window that's coming up, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And they would still have quality depth there. So they're in a really good spot there. I like the pieces in that room.
Let's talk about center with Drake Nugent, who we didn't see in the spring game. Raheem Anderson, who you continue to hear good things about and how he played this spring. But then also Greg Crippen, a guy that you could imagine also starting for a team, including Michigan. But there's just so much competition there that it's kind of hard to envision, I don't even know. I mean, there's just so many guys. I guess guys could move to guard if they need it, but then you have 2 all Big Ten guys there. it's just great problems to have. But Drake Nugent is a guy who I think is second team preseason All-American, according to Walter Camp, or maybe third team. And he has guys pushing him like Raheem Anderson and Greg Crippen. I think Nugent's going to win the job. I think he's good enough. I think that, everything you heard about his time at Stanford is he was probably a little bit underrated even as well, and played a little bit banged up last season. But I think that's going to be a battle too. And I think both Raheem and Greg Crippen showed quite a bit on Saturday to make you believe that the future is bright at the very least, and that there's a ton of depth there.
Yeah, everything we've heard about Nugent, I mean, again, the bar is set extremely high when you have a guy like Olu Oluwatimi who leaves the program after winning the Outland and the Remington Awards. We've heard there are people in that building that think that Drake Nugent could do some of those same things. And I'm not setting the bar that high, but like I said, I like what we've heard about him, but the fact that you still have, they like Raheem Anderson, they see him as a future starter. We've been hearing about Greg Crippen, it seems like dating back to bowl practices 2 years ago, about how they feel about him. So the depth there at all of these positions to me it's a strength for them. And it also allows you, you have a pretty good idea of what your best five might be, but when you have more options to compete, and maybe your most talented five isn't always your best five either. But that's something else where I could see a lot of these battles going into the season and kind of staying fluid throughout the season. There's going to be guys are going to get banged up. There are always injuries. It feels like there's always something on, Zach Sinter's hand, some kind of club, or Trevor Keegan will have like a neck injury or something will pop up somewhere. And regardless of who wins these battles, I think you're going to see all of these guys probably play. So we haven't even talked about Giovanni El Hadi yet, because there's not competition at the guard spots, but he's someone who I think that proved last year he can come in and handle the job. So their offensive line depth is great across the charts, and the fact that they are so veteran too, I think also helps take a lot of stuff off of Sharon Moore's plate now that he's the sole offensive coordinator. So you still got to coach him, but when you have guys that have been here and have played and have won at this level, and have kind of maintained what they've done the last couple of years, it's a lot easier to come in the building every day and put the plan together on what you're going to get to work on.
For sure. I was going to mention Gio, and just a reminder out there that Giovanni El Hadi is a backup. That's how good you could field a great second offensive line, and that would compete with a lot of first team offensive lines around the country, even in the Big Ten. Let's move to edge, where it's another one of those things where I think situationally they're pretty much set up for any situation. You have a guy like Josiah Stewart that I think is probably a 2 at this point, however you want to call it, but could be a guy that is in the mix absolutely on third downs, situations like that. One of the more, I think Jalen Harrell is probably locked in as a starter. You got to keep your job and all that, but in terms of projecting this out to the season, I would think he's kind of locked in. The guy who was really impressive in the spring game was Derek Moore. Then you have Braden McGregor, who was kind of the darling of the spring before that. It didn't show as much in limited time, mind you, during the spring game. But Derek Moore just feels to me like just the upside is so high there. I also think Braden McGregor can be good. I think everybody's going to play a lot in that top 4. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on maybe how this thing plays out in terms of who's your quote unquote starter? Because I don't think the label's one thing, but I know all those guys are going to contribute and make big impacts.
Yeah, I feel like Jalen Harrell is probably your guy that, if you want to call him, I mean, they're all going to play probably close to an equal amount of snaps, but because Harrell is a guy that has the 3-down ability, can set the edge against the run, he can cover guys down the field. He looked improved as a pass rusher, which was good to see in the brief glimpse we got of him. So I think that he's in the mix there. Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore, listen, those guys were dominant on Saturday, playing on opposite teams in that game. And Braden McGregor, he didn't play a ton, but neither did a lot of players that they consider starters right now. So I don't know that I put a ton of stock into that, but yeah, those guys are they're loaded there. I think that from a pass rush perspective, they have the chance to be a little more consistently explosive. I could see a scenario where those guys are getting home a little bit more, and it's taking pressure off the back two levels of your defense. But in terms of who's winning what job, it's hard to. I think that Harrell is a lock to play most of the downs, but from there, they're going to rotate and see what happens. I think you might have a little bit of versatility there too, given that you can put guys in different spots in different scenarios. So tough to handicap it. I don't even know. I mean, I think who ultimately wins the battle is going to be the guy week to week that's the most disruptive. And Josiah Stewart, to me, is as freaky as they said he was. And I can see a path where maybe he's the guy that gets the lion's share, but we'll see what happens. I said it would be Braden McGregor a few weeks ago. I don't know. I mean, it changes every week, it seems like. So, which I think is going to be kind of the defining factor of this group.
Yeah, part of me likes having guys that you have out there for most every down. Just because they can make a move early on in the game, set up another move for later on, that sort of thing. And I think as the year went on, when they were healthy, especially with Mike Morris, like Michigan was keeping those guys on the field for the most part, first, second, third down with some subbing. But right now, and maybe they'll get to that this year, but right now I just see this as everybody brings something different to the table. I could see, on first down, if a team's trying to run the football and it's Derek Moore and Jalen Harrell on the edges, and Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, and Chris Jenkins on the inside, or a combination, two out of those three. It's just going to be really tough. It's going to be really tough. And everybody brings something else to the table. So edge group looking very good at this point. We talked a little bit about linebacker on Monday, so I kind of want to skip over that because it's kind of one of those things we're going to have to wait and see. Mike Barrett, Junior Colson, those are your incumbent starters. But Ernest Hausman looks so good on Saturday that I can't imagine a scenario where he doesn't play a pretty significant role. And you have Nikhai Hill-Green back from injury as well. So you're looking at, it's kind of like the offensive line, but that second team, and maybe more so at linebacker because it's just four guys. But let's say your second team is Ernest Hausman and Nikhai Hill-Green. Like, they would start as a combination on many different linebacking cores in the country. So that's a fantastic one there. Corner is the last kind of high profile one I think that we have here. Again, we touched on it, on Monday, but you look at Amorion Walker, who it feels like I think it confirmed, AB, what we talked about when Jim Harbaugh talked back on February 23rd. And we said, it feels like a little bit like they are trying to boost his confidence a little bit, get him going and bought in on being a corner as opposed to a wide receiver. And they had glowing things to say about him. And of course, his athleticism is at that point, but I don't think necessarily as a corner he's quite there yet. From what we've heard, that has motivated some of the other corners, like a Jaden McBurrows, like a Miles Pollard, both of whom stood out on Saturday. Jair Hill is an incoming true freshman. They've got options here. I think more options than a lot of people thought, including myself, coming into this offseason. But I don't know. Your thoughts on kind of where things stand? I would still pencil in Amorion, probably in that one spot. I'd maybe throw an or on it with like a Jaden McBurrows. And I know Jaden can also play the nickel if you need him to. And Mike Sainer still can play at the corner, which we saw a little bit in the spring game when he was in the first quarter. But your feelings on maybe how this competition, again, it's one of those ones that's going to be ongoing, but where things are right now.
I think they want him to win it because if it does click with those athletic traits, then you're talking about a unicorn, an alien, as Ronnie Bell would refer to him as. But Saturday, it wasn't pretty. You give all credit in the world to a guy like Peyton O'Leary, that was kind of the matchup that the Mays team exploited, was Peyton O'Leary on Amorion Walker. And it was rough at times. He's not, I just think a lot of what they're asking him to do is going to come with, like you said, the confidence. It's going to come with the play experience. It's going to come instinctually. It's a muscle, defensive back. So much of what you do is muscle memory, and they have one of the best position coaches in that regard, in Steve Klinkscale, in developing those guys. But he's got a ways to go. And I thought that I feel like Jesse Minter sort of helped us tap the brakes a little bit on the Amorion Walker hype when he said last week that, they can see him being on sort of a similar path to Will Johnson, where you just kind of work him in. And by the end of the year, maybe he is one of your top two corners, which Will Johnson certainly was. He'll be their number one corner this year easily, I'd say. But, Jade McBurroughs, like we talked about on our Monday show, he will come up and hit you. And there was a couple guys, I forgot who we talked to on Pro Day that asked who he thought was the best maybe cover guy on the team or someone that gave people the most issues. And Jade McBurroughs came up at least once. So he's a guy that, if he can stay healthy, I think there's a chance to him. He's got a shot there. I also think that he could play a bit in the nickel. Mike Sainer still could play a little bit more on the outside. And that's maybe the key to all this. I mean, if you can find someone who can play that nickel spot as well as Sainer still did last year, maybe Mikey does switch to the outside and you get those other guys that work in. But in the here and now, I think that schematically they can do a lot of things to cover up that number 2 cornerback job. But I think even in the non-conference, you're going to see teams kind of pick on Amorian Walker when he's out there. And for him, it's going to be all about so much about what you do at defensive back. It's putting a bad play behind you and getting to the next play, because you're going to get burned. It's going to happen. And, the great ones figure out, ways to not let those snowball. So Morion, there's a lot of work there to do still, but you can see it. I mean, you see the traits, you see the movement when he's out there. It's just a matter of putting it all together. And again, remember, he's still a sophomore too, that only played corner for, seriously full time for 5 or 6 weeks. So not out on that yet, but a lot of work to do.
A lot of work to do. Also a lot of time, as you kind of mentioned there, we got a lot of time to the season, and there's a lot of time left in his career in college football. So that helps him as well. And he has Steve Klinkskill to help develop him. But I agree with just about everything you said there. I mean, I like some of the other options as well, but Amorian could still come around. And if he does, then, man, the sky is the limit. I think Jim Harbaugh said that explicitly. Okay, those are our position battles for Michigan football. Obviously competition is going to be ongoing at other positions as well. There's going to be battles. There's going to be somebody that wins a job that maybe we didn't talk about here. But that is just the nature of football right now coming out of spring. I think that's kind of, our feelings on where things stand there. Let's flip over to basketball, Anthony, and talk about the roster, talk about the transfer portal a little bit. We don't have to get into every single name that Michigan has contacted, but I wanted to start with the roster, then talk about options to potentially add to that roster. And the first thing I wanted to talk about, because we got so many questions about it on the message board today in our chat with subscribers, which you can partake in each and every week if you head to the Wolverine.com, sign up, $29.99 through August 31st. Quick plug there. Could Hunter Dickinson come back to Michigan? He's in the transfer portal. He is also currently, as we speak, I believe, on either a Zoom call or in-person meeting with Kentucky, according to a report from Jeff Goodman of Stadium. He's been in contact with just about every high major team that can use a big man, and even some that probably have a pretty good big man, but it's Hunter Dickinson. He's the top rated player in the transfer portal for a reason. I also start thinking about this, and I was talking about this with my dad yesterday. We were just talking about how, the way Hunter went out, right? With really no comments about Michigan, even on his own podcast, nothing on social media, other than others reporting that he's popped up in the transfer portal. Could that be something as well where, hey, he hasn't said goodbye yet because he doesn't know that it's goodbye yet? From, things we've heard, and again, we'll have some updates over at the Wolverine.com, get premium access now. From everything that, we've heard, that's not totally out of the woods at this point. I wouldn't expect it personally, but it's not totally out of the woods. Also, when you look at this, there was a report from a Maryland writer just the other day, I believe on Monday, that's a possibility. So, Anthony Broome, could this happen?
I suppose it could. It'd be awkward, and a lot of tweets and social media posts might get deleted or even just left up as receipts for posterity, whatever it is. I don't know that I see that. I think that the wording of Michigan's statement talking about how it was unfortunate. I mean, I don't think that bridges have been burned here, but there have been, Hunter Dickinson's famous for ruffling feathers across college basketball. And I think that with what happened last week, there were finally some feathers ruffled in Ann Arbor, especially with I don't know that everyone was fully in tune or really that much in tune at all with what his plans or intentions were. So I won't rule it out. I mean, we've seen crazier things happen. I mean, if we're talking about, let's just say, we have reports now that Michigan is interested in Caleb Love. I don't think that Caleb Love is going to wind up at Michigan because of NIL and because Love's a St. Louis native. They're talking about him going to Missouri. It makes a lot of sense for that to happen. But if you're, if you're telling me the buzz from the last few days is that Hunter Dickinson is waffling potentially, and that Caleb Love is interested in Michigan. Michigan's been in contact with him. Could I see a scenario where Dickinson comes back as part of a package deal? I suppose I could. I think it's more likely that both of those guys aren't here than they are here. And again, we've talked about before how things have been so fluid in the portal so far. Before we came on Three's Joe Tipton had said something along the lines of one of the top transfers is set to come off the board today. And we're sitting here going, oh God, who are we going to talk about? How do we set the plan for this show?
Probably Love, because Hunter's
I was going to say, as we're recording this, I checked social media. I don't know if this would be the one he's referring to, but former Arizona point guard Kirk Kriisa is off the board to West Virginia. So I don't know if that's one of the top ones. It could be. I suspect that it was, but we'll see. At this point, given, I almost feel like there's more to be. I mean, listen, if Hunter Dickinson calls up Juwan Howard and says, forget NIL, forget all of that, I want to finish what I started here. You take him back and you deal with, the stuff, because the comments from teammates, listen, no offense. A lot of the stuff that was on social media, we saw stuff from Wilt Cheddar. I think it was on Instagram. There was a comment that went around from Jace Howard. Listen, I mean, I'm going to put stock into the former All-American as opposed to the guys who, no offense to those guys. I like those guys a lot. Good guys and I think solid role players. But I think you can mend those fences if, a roster comes together that everyone's kind of back on the same page. But at this point, given everything that's gone on, I think that I think that if you're going all in on a hard reset, to me, it just feels like I'm not going to say they shouldn't, bring him back. I think you do if he wants to come back, but I don't see it happening, honestly. There are too many high majors out there with bags of cash they're willing to throw around for basketball, which I was with some donors on Friday night. It doesn't seem like there's still much of an appetite to do that for hoops. Hunter Dickinson's path to making money in this game is not maybe as long as he thought it would be. So I still ultimately see that being the case where he goes elsewhere.
You do bring up an interesting point, though, when it comes to Caleb Love. Now, whether Caleb Love would be attractive to him or not, or maybe it's somebody else that Michigan brings in. They already brought in Amari Burnett. I don't know if that necessarily totally moves the needle for Hunter Dickinson. But actually, I think he committed before Hunter left, a day before. So, but you bring up that point of, who are the two things that we speculated were Hunter Dickinson's reasons for leaving were, one, the roster coming back and how things were kind of looking bleak there. And two, the potential to be a free agent where your value goes way up, right? Well, you're a free agent now. Your value at Michigan could go up. Again, I don't think they're going to dole out a bag of cash or, whoever's involved with the NIL to do that. But, maybe it'd be more than it would have been if he would have not entered the portal and just stayed, that sort of thing. And then also what Juwan Howard does in the transfer portal. If they can move quickly here and get a guy or two, if it's Caleb Love or if it's somebody else, then I think it could ease some of the concerns that Hunter Dickinson would maybe have. But again, I don't see it happening.
Let me say this too. He's in the transfer portal right now. He's not on, technically still on the roster, but you're a free agent right now. You don't get to dictate how this roster was built anymore, as far as I'm concerned. If you're in the building and you're saying these are the guys, if you're pushing for guys, that's one thing. But, I don't think Hunter Dickinson suddenly gets to, have and I'm not saying you're saying this, but, I don't think that I'm just interested in seeing where it goes. So I don't want to stick my foot in my mouth from there. But if Michigan can move fast to fill some of these spots, and let's just, for example, if you're telling me that in the next couple of days, they could come out of this with, let's just say, Harrison Ingram and Chris Ledlum, just the two first names that popped in my head. If that's what fills my roster, sorry, I'm I'll roll with that and Amari Burnett and Terrace Reed and Doug McDaniel and see what else I can come up with. So,
but
if you want to come back, this better happen pretty quickly, I think.
But a couple things, and now we're talking long on Hunter Dickinson. Neither of us think it's going to happen, but just that door being left open just a little bit. What was I going to say on that? Well, basically, too, I don't think it'd be Hunter Dickinson dictating anything. I think it'd be more, the onus is on the staff to, hey, and I don't think this would be their number one priority either, but, build a roster, right, that can win. And if Hunter Dickinson sees a path to that, I don't think you say no to him.
I think that's ultimately the point I made too, is that if he wants to come back, it's a situation where like, hey, look, just added Amari Burnett. Here's Harrison Ingram. You sure about this? Sure about it? I could see that maybe being the case, but I don't know. It depends. Again, Lent is coming to an end soon. We're going to hear from Hunter on social media soon enough. So we'll see what happens. I want to make my stance very clear, though. If Hunter Dickinson wants to come back, let him come back. But the idea that they're trying to put together a roster for him to reconsider, I don't know. I felt like you could be part of those conversations while still being, kind of in the building, so to speak. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
100%. Let's move on to some of the guys that are catching our eye right now in the transfer portal, which Caleb Love is a guy that you mentioned. He's a polarizing one. You get the report from Andrew Slater, who does a tremendous job on the recruiting scene from a national standpoint. Him saying that, Missouri's the leader, but Michigan, could be in the mix. NIL looks like that is a big factor there. And it is for a lot of these guys that have some high major suitors, that sort of thing. But Caleb Love, very polarizing. It's already sparked quite the debate between the fan base. Would you take him? Would you not take him? I strongly believe, I talked to somebody who covers North Carolina in the ACC today, and I strongly believe that it was not an option for Caleb Love to come back to North Carolina. I also strongly believe that Caleb Love did not want to come back to North Carolina. It was kind of a mutual type of thing there. So, and what are the reasons for that? Well, you hear the rumors about, he doesn't get along with his teammates for various reasons that we don't have to go into. Whatever. Two is probably more importantly, Anthony, because some of those teammates are returning, right? If he wasn't the problem or part of the problem on the floor, it would have been him coming back and them not coming back. So probably more importantly is shot selection, shot volume, a low percentage, especially this past season. That backcourt between him and RJ Davis did not mesh. That backcourt was part of a North Carolina team that had its fewest amount of assists in a season since assists began being tracked in 1968, 1969. I read that as well. So, look, he shot less than 30% from three, but he attempted 244 three-pointers this past season. He's also a guy that scored 27 points in the second half of a Sweet 16 game against UCLA last year in 2022. He's also the guy that hit the dagger three to seal the game against Duke in the Final Four. He's also the guy that went 2 of 10 from three in the national championship game in which they lost. So he is very much hot and cold. He's very polarizing, but he raises your ceiling. I think maybe he lowers your floor from a game-to-game perspective. But your thoughts on Caleb Love, and then we'll get to quick hitters on some other guys that catch our eye.
Yeah, I almost feel the opposite on that, where I feel like he raises your floor for next year's roster, but I don't know that the ceiling is because, it's all the things that, that we heard about this year's team with Michigan, where the ball would just stop moving on offense and you could be streaky from the perimeter and things like that. I'm not saying, again, it's another situation. If he wants to come here, you figure it out because he's arguably one of the top, 3, 4, 5 best guys in the portal right now. On3 has him at number 4 in terms of players currently available in the transfer portal. Hunter Dickinson, number 1. Max Abmas from Oral Roberts is number 2. Haven't heard any contact with him on Michigan. Harrison Ingram, we'll see. But obviously a guy that Juwan Howard has a relationship with. But if one of those blue chip transfers wants to come, you figure it out and you build the roster from there. But I think that I could see the pros and cons to it. I mean, he's a high volume guy, and we'll see. I don't. I think some of the character stuff I think is probably a little bit overblown. I think that was maybe just kind of a powder keg of drama at North Carolina this past season, but we'll see. I would take him if he wanted to come, but again, it sounds like it might come down to NIL, and we know that Michigan's having a hard enough time playing that game on the football end of things, let alone for basketball. So
yeah,
we'll see. Not surprised that contact has been made. I mean, this is as expansive a board I think that we've ever seen Juwan Howard put together. So we'll see.
No doubt. I would take him too, gun to my head. I know it would be a decision. It'd be a tough decision. It'd be something that you probably at times during the season, wonder about. But at the same time, a couple things. One, change of scenery sometimes can be good. I mean, I think Caleb Love definitely realized he wanted to be out of that situation into a new one. I also think that he'll be older now. He wants to continue to prove that he can play in the NBA. I mean, he flirted with going a couple of years ago and wasn't able to, to get his stock high enough to do that. I think he would, could potentially buy into the culture here. But again, there are a lot of ifs there. But I would take him too. I mean, and my point on the ceiling thing is he can score like that. I mean, he can light it up. So he could lead you to the final Monday night of the season, but the floor may be being lowered because he can also shoot you out of a game and you're going home early or you're losing a game you shouldn't, that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I stand on him. AB, you've done fantastic work tracking the transfer portal board. So people that haven't, we had an April 4th update, and again, things move fast. I'm sure AB will have another one here soon, but kind of a hot board of sorts. And there are some intriguing names on there. Tamar Bates is a guy Michigan's been linked to, former Indiana guard. Not super high on him. A guy I am pretty high on is Gonzaga's Hunter Salas, who Michigan offered back in 2020, back in August. He may have visited at one point. I don't have that information right in front of me at this point. But, he was somebody that certainly Juwan Howard has a relationship with. And then the guy who I like a lot is Chris Ledlum out of Harvard, first team all Ivy League, can shoot it a little bit, only 30.2%. But I think with better teammates around him, better looks, and kind of a lesser role, which is, interesting to say sometimes, but that can really make the numbers go up. Look at Terrence Williams, for example, on one side of things. His numbers per 40 minutes were way better when he had a lesser role. Look at Mike Smith transferring up from Columbia. Different position, but I think still a comparison that could fit, especially with the Ivy League thing. His 3-point numbers and other shooting numbers and assist numbers went way up because of a lesser role. So I think that could play a factor here. But 6'6", 225 pounds, can play the 3, can play the 4. More importantly, I think he could play the 3 in a bind. But he's a guy that can finish at the rim. I would really like him. I think the 4 is kind of the spot Michigan needs the most. But any thoughts on other guys on the board here that catch your eye?
Ledlum, I think Ledlum fits if he's playing the 4. I mean, if you're looking for someone on the wing still, again, this is a guy I think he shot about what was the number here? I just had it pulled up. It was like 29% from 3 last season, but 47% shooter from the floor, 18 point something points per game. Again, I think Juwan's hit fairly well with the Ivy League transfers. Jalen Llewellyn to me is still a bit of an unknown. We'll see if he comes back, but it kind of seemed like he was starting to figure it out when he went down with that knee injury. But Ledlum, again, they need so much more. They need so much more offense at the 4, and I think they only averaged about 8.5 points per game between Will Cheddar and Terrence Williams this year. And listen, those guys could take a leap, but I'm Juwan Howard coaching for my job next year. I would take Ledlum, no questions asked. So
yeah,
I think Ledlum would fit. I want to talk a little bit about Nimari Burnett for a second. And it's interesting because, I finally was able, had a little bit of time to sit down and go through what he does well and how he profiles out. And, came away with the takeaway that I think he can be kind of one of those defensive tone setters for this team. Offensively, I think that will improve, as he gets more playing time. And if he stays healthy, he's had some bad luck as it pertains to that. But the interesting about the defensive thing is that not even maybe an hour or so later, you have a story out that I didn't know was coming with an Alabama writer who said that he could be a tone setter defensively. And I was like, oh, wow, there's quick confirmation on that. So I think that the more that I did research on him and kind of followed his path over the last few years, that's a guy too, where he's got a medical red shirt. He was a freshman during the COVID year. He has as many as 3 years of eligibility remaining. So it's still, the best case scenario for him is that he pops and goes to the NBA, but he could be a guy that kind of rounds himself into a stalwart. He was a starter for Alabama until he got hurt this year. So I like that pickup a lot. AJ Storr from the St. John's transfer is someone that I've been pretty high on. Haven't seen a ton of buzz on him lately in terms of where he's leaning, but Michigan's been in contact with him. He was a freshman last year, shot 40% from three. That's someone I'd be looking at on the wing as well. If Hunter Dickinson's not on this roster, I do think that there needs to be more of an emphasis on, your offense from, those two forward spots. And if it's Ledlum and a Storr or someone else, or, maybe you bring in a two guard, maybe Caleb Love does come and then one of those guys is playing the three, I just talked about him. Nimari Burnett. One of those guys is playing the three, then I think you could piece something together here. The important thing is you need to build some kind of identity. You need to get back to that. If you're going to be elite offensively, be elite offensively. If you're going to be elite defensively, bring in guys that are able to kind of scrap and claw on that end of the floor. But you can't half-ass both, which is what I think this year's roster more or less kind of did. So interested in seeing where it goes from here. I think there's a path to this team being competitive next year still, but it all depends on what takes place in the portal over these next couple of weeks, really leading up to usually things are pretty much sorted out by the end of May.
Real quick, I feel like AJ Storr is wide open. John Rothstein tweet from March 30th, which has Michigan listed, but I don't even want to count how many schools are listed here. It'll be interesting to see, maybe these guys have different timelines. Maybe he's really early on, wants to take some visits. Maybe some other guys are closer to making decisions, but he's definitely one to watch. Real quick on Nimari Burnett before we go, I agree. To me, he's not a sexy pickup, right? This is going to be his third school in 4 seasons. He hasn't really made an impact. He's also battled injuries, but look, he can do something really well. And actually, Clint Lamb from our Alabama site said he's an elite defender at the very least, right? That's what Michigan's getting. And he can do something really well. That's important. Michigan's defense has taken a little bit of a nosedive, or a lot of a nosedive, over the last 2 seasons. And what did that coincide with? You had the previous 2 years, Franz Wagner and Isaiah Livers on the wing. The next 2 seasons, you have a mix of, Caleb Houston, Jet Howard, Joey Baker on the wing, right? It's important to have a guy like Nimari Burnett who can be not quite your Charles Matthews type, right? Or even a Franz Wagner, but somebody who can set the tone and can get steals, get deflections, impact, take away a wing when you need him to. That's important. So I think that's what he's getting. So I completely agree with you on Nimari Burnett. He can shoot a little bit. If he could develop a little bit more with the ball in his hands, that'd be fine as well. But need some more pieces too. I think we hit on some of the bigger names, but we'll continue to track all this over at thewolverine.com. $29.99, as we've mentioned, that deal gets you premium access all the way through August 31st. AB, we did promise some hockey talk at the beginning, so I will ask you a quick question. Does Michigan, 1, get to the national championship game, and 2, win the national championship this weekend in Tampa, not Tampa Bay, Tampa?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're so due. We've talked about it for weeks, where they just have the most talent relative to their peers in the sport, just in terms of the NFL draft picks, those guys that played for the U.S. development team over in Plymouth. So I think so. It feels right, but the 2 weeks between the 2 week layoff kind of scares me, but everyone has to deal with it. So we'll see what happens from there. But yeah, CB's heading down there, and I don't know what kind of omen that is, but we'll see. We'll see where it goes. Hopefully, he comes back with a nice tan and a lot of good stories to tell.
No doubt. Yeah, Michigan in their 27th Frozen Four. That's an NCAA record, looking for their 10th championship. First since 1998. They're right now on their first back-to-back Frozen Four streak since 02-03. So they can make history here even further with the national championship. But Quinnipiac on Thursday night, 8:30 on ESPN2. That was, of course, Michigan's opponent in the regional final last year that got Michigan to the Frozen Four. They won 7-4 over them, but Quinnipiac leads the nation. Goals per game allowed, 1.5. Michigan leads the nation with 169 total goals. So great offense, great defense. And maybe this with the layoff too, AB. Think about this. Michigan didn't play all that well against Penn State. So maybe they needed a week and a half layoff to kind of regroup, come back home, fine-tune a couple things, and figure out what they're going to do here against Quinnipiac. But potentially Boston or Minnesota, which would be a rematch of the Big Ten tournament championship game if they get to the title game. But we will see, and follow all the coverage at thewolverine.com. Make sure to like this video. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and give us a 5-star review if you're listening on the podcast feed. Even if you're not, just go to the podcast feed. Give us a 5-star review. We appreciate everybody watching, everybody listening, all the people over at thewolverine.com for joining us there, and we will see you next time.